Welcome, Professor Francis. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview with us, do a little chat. Obviously, this is ahead of the Pint of Science talk, so, maybe perhaps not that many spoilers, but just enough to get our audience excited.
Okay.
Before we dive in, how are you feeling about the event? Are you looking forward to sharing your research in a pub setting?
Well, I love Pint of Science. I love the fact that it's away from the university, so to say, and talk to people in Portsmouth. I think that's really exciting, and it's also really interesting for me because people often misunderstand prisons, and this helps me to have a good conversation about the nature of prisons and maybe help people to think about prisons a bit different. It's really fun for us to show our local community what exciting things we do.
Very true.
So yeah, it's great.
I imagine criminology isn't something people typically discuss over a pint, unless they're watching a true crime documentary. But your work really gets into the heart of some big questions about justice and rehabilitation. But before we get into into your talk and what you're going to speak about, I'd love to hear a bit what drew you into the field in the first place. You spend a lot of time studying prisons around the world. What first got you interested in criminology, and did you always see yourself researching prisons, or did you just kind of stumble into it?
It's a bit of both, to be honest. I studied psychology first, and I did choose psychology because I had this fascination with people and human behavior and why people are, why they like what they like. And that's a good grounding for understanding prisons. And I thought prisons were fascinating always because they are closed worlds. And what goes on in closed worlds is just really intriguing. And because I know there are so many misunderstandings about prison, people think they know but they don't know, I have always thought it fascinating to try and understand what prisons are like and what prisons are for. Many societies with sometimes their own codes, their own behavioral norms, their own lingo, and certainly closed prisons where people are for a long time, they do develop as many societies. I think you can say that, yes.
Your book, Comparative Criminal Justice, is now in its 5th edition.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
What's one thing about criminal justice systems that still surprises you even after all your research?
The sheer variety of how justice is done across the world is just amazing. For example, jury justice. In this country, with serious offences, a jury decides on guilty or not guilty. In other countries, they don't. It's judges. In yet other countries, it's judges together with juries. It can be done in so many different ways. And once you learn more about those various ways, you realise that, we can do justice in a great many different ways. And it really needs to fit the culture, the fabric of a society, what is best, and to understand and appreciate that enormous diversity is just good fun. There used to be a prison in Portsmouth, Kingston, for lifers, for life sentence prisoners, but now there is no prison in Portsmouth, and actually over the centuries there almost always has been one. So in a way it's strange that we're now a prison-less city.
What made you want to be part of Pint of Science, and do you often get the chance to talk about criminology over a pint?
Well, Pint of Science is an annual event. I'm really proud of what we do. So I'm also really proud and pleased to see that we're going to have 3 evenings in Portsmouth where colleagues in criminology and criminal justice talk about their stuff. It's really varied, the program looks fantastic, and I think it's a great opportunity to connect with our local community. It's great for them to appreciate the work that we do here, and that is teaching loads of students, doing research to help improve the criminal justice system, and we also train many professionals, police officers, probation officers, and I'm sure many people in Portsmouth don't really know, so it's a chance for us to introduce ourselves individually and collectively to our local community, and I think it's fantastic.
Very true. We do have a big range of speakers this year, don't we? We have professors and past police officers.
Yeah.
Really good. Your talk touches on some pretty heavy themes. How do you balance engaging discussions about serious topics and maybe in informal settings like this one?
Well, prisons are very often grim places, and there's a lot of suffering in prisons. And we need to remember many people in prison have caused suffering, but the suffering that occurs in prisons is real. Prisons are loud, smelly, very unpleasant places. We have about 88,000 people in prison in this country. And virtually all of those people will come out sooner or later. And it's really important that we work with these individuals where we can, in the hope that when they come out, they are more likely to lead a productive life and less likely to commit crime. That's a community safety objective that prisons have. So something useful needs to happen inside prisons so that we achieve that goal. So prisons, in a way, have contradictory goals to achieve. It's a place of punishment, but it's also a place where we want to make people better if we can. That's a complex but also really exciting challenge that society gives to prisons. And I find it really interesting to see how they manage both objectives at the same time.
No, I agree. Do you think maybe then it's also important to destigmatize prisons in these kind of informal settings so that people, before, also obviously you rehabilitate these prisoners, but also like doing this work outside of prisons?
Yes, prisons have a strange place in society. People know about them. But in one way, society is obsessed with prisons through documentaries, and there's often stories in the media, through films, and etc. So prisons feature really large in our cultural consciousness. At the same time, we tend to neglect prisons and the people inside them. And it's a strange kind of contradiction that is difficult to understand. Just like people often have the idea that prisons are filled with baddies, with dangerous animal-like individuals. And while some people are certainly more unpleasant than others, many people in prison from a day-to-day perspective are not that dangerous, but have done some pretty stupid things. So to manage a population in prison that is also very mixed in terms of the risk that people pose, the backgrounds that they have, the challenges that they face, the things they've done, it's really complicated to make a prison work with all those characters under the same roof.
You talk about a lot, and you're going to take us through the journey through UK and Nordic prisons. Mm-hmm. If you had to sum up the biggest difference between these prisons, what would be one word? What would it be?
In one word, many prisons in the Nordic countries, and then you think of Norway, Denmark, Sweden, Iceland, prisons are a bit more homely, if you want one word. And the idea of having prisons to be a bit more homely is the conviction that they have in these countries that if you offer a decent environment, people are also more likely to behave decently.
Do you think that maybe this difference, you will obviously talk about this in the Pint of Science, mm-hmm. But do you think that this difference maybe is what should be brought over to England?
Well, there are things we can learn from the Nordic countries, and before even looking at what the prisons look like, we can study the statistics on reoffending and reconvictions. And then it turns out that people who leave prisons in Norway and in Iceland are less likely to come back. So there is something that they're getting right, and that makes it really important that we study how they get these things right. And I'm not saying that every prison should be cushy, not at all, but as reducing reoffending is a key objective of the criminal justice system as a whole, and prisons in particular, if there are countries not that far away and not that different to us who, according to the data, do it better, we really owe it to ourselves to have a good look about how they achieve that.
Definitely. We should keep learning and
Yeah.
keep improving. Now, maybe something a bit more light-hearted. If you could design maybe the perfect prison system, what's one quirky or maybe unexpected feature you would maybe include?
What you want in a prison is, apart from orderly, safe and secure, is inject somehow a sense of hope and progression for prisoners. And by that I mean it is better if prisoners don't wake up every morning feeling hopeless, that there's nothing to live for, nothing to strive for. It is far better if they think, if I do what I'm asked, it's going to get better for me. I may go to a better prison, I may go to a better cell, I may go to a better wing. If I do what's required, good things are going to happen for me, and I can have a prison journey that actually sees improvement over time. If that's the design of a prison system, you have a chance of establishing a degree of hope and a degree of motivation within prisoners that behaving well will pay off. And that makes both high secure and low secure prisons more easy to manage if prisoners really feel that and if it is properly implemented. So if you want one word, the word hope is important.
Oh, that's such a lovely answer. I actually love that a lot. I was expecting something more like a coffee machine. Sorry,
a coffee machine is good. Wildlife is good. Caring for animals is good. Yeah, many things are good. Visits are important, but more all-encompassing is because prisons are hard to manage. There's violence in prisons. There's a lot of self-harm and suicide risks in prisons. So more abstract, but also in a way more all-encompassing is providing a sense of if I do okay, it'll get better for me. If that's felt by a large part of the prison population, prisons are far easier to manage and far more effective.
I mean, you would know better than anyone. You've done something that most people would avoid. You went, you lived in a prison for an entire month up in a Nordic country. Would you like to tell us more about that? And did you ever feel like you were kind of like on an undercover reality show or something like that?
Yes, I spent a bit of time in 2 prisons in Iceland. They were open prisons, so they are filled with people who have behaved okay in the closed prisons and who are often near the end of a sentence. So these are the least chaotic prisons. But it helps me to come to understand these places from the inside. So I asked the prison authorities in Iceland, could I stay as a quasi-prisoner and live the life of a prisoner? They thought that was a really good idea. They liked the idea very much, facilitated it. So yes, I had a room rather than a cell, that's a better term for it. But I lived the daily routine of prisoners, so I worked where there was work, I did education, I had breakfast and lunch and dinner at the time, and I spoke to everyone and I interviewed everyone who was prepared to talk to me. So I tried to emulate that role as faithfully as I could, but at the same time everybody knew who I was. I wasn't undercover, and I explained to everyone that I'm from England, where we don't have prisons like this, so I'm here to try to see how they work. And I learned a lot about how prisons operate. I learned a lot about prisoner culture and staff culture, and tried to come to understand how prisoners who sometimes have been in prison for quite some time, how they view themselves, how they view the world, how they view the immediate environment, and both from a psychology and from a criminology point of view, that was fascinating.
Oh, that must have been such a cool experience, honestly. I remember I was in the lecture where you spoke about this, and I feel like even those people in Pint of Science would agree. I think that's such a cool experience to hear about, and I hope you might talk about that.
I certainly will. I'll talk about it a great deal. It felt, and this is really ironic, it felt like a privilege. And typically a prison sentence and privilege are almost opposites. The least privileged people in the world tend to go to prison, the most privileged people often don't. But to try and understand just what the daily vibes are, how people talk to each other, how people, sometimes years after the fact, talk about their crime, how violent offenders are often very different in how they discuss their offending from, say, drugs offenders, from sexual offenders. So the whole process of sense making by prisoners, and not in one interview or in one moment, but just because of chats during other activities, it was really enriching for me, and I've come to understand how people get through the day in prison much better than I otherwise could have done.
Amazing. If your research maybe was turned into a Netflix documentary, what do you think it would be called?
That is a really good question.
Bit tricky.
Yes. Oh, what would it be called? How about The Prisoner Professor?
Oh, I like it. It has a nice rhythm to it as well.
Yeah. Or the Professor Prisoner?
Professor Prisoner, yeah.
Something like that.
Something like that. I think, that really encapsulates your experience
That's me.
as well.
Yeah.
That's just you. Well, if there's one key takeaway you want your audience to leave after your talk, what do you think that would be?
Well, from a psychology background again and criminology, people are people. And even people behind bars deserve a degree of decency. That's not only because that is the humane thing to do, but it's also important to never forget that people in prison will come out again. They could be your neighbor. You want an adjusted neighbor who can handle life on the outside. So, of course, prisons are places where punishment is implemented, where punishment occurs, but it shouldn't traumatize or destroy people at the same time. They will come out, and it's really important for them and for us that they lead a law-abiding, productive life afterwards. So never let lose sight of the human element of our prison population.
I love that answer. I definitely agree. Lastly, if you could have a pint with any criminologist or justice reformer, like past or present, who would it be and why?
I would love to have a pint with a man called John Howard. John Howard was, in a way, many generations ago, a sort of a predecessor. He was a prison reformer from the 18th century. And he would get on his horse and he would go clippity-clop to the local prison, knock on the door and say, "Hello, I'm John Howard. I'm a prison reformer. Can you show me this prison?" And then he wrote books about what he saw. And so he did what I love to do 250 years ago. And 250 years ago already, he found prisons in the UK really bad, dangerous places where people died because of infectious diseases. He then traveled abroad to the Netherlands and other countries and found prisons better in Europe back then. So I would love to pick his brain about what he saw about prisons 250 years ago. And some of those differences are still with us today. So I'd love to think that John Howard and I could have a really good conversation about prisons that in a way is timeless.
Oh, that's really inspiring. I definitely think that maybe someday you'll be the John Howard for someone else.
That would be nice, yes.
But no, this has been a very insightful conversation. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this with us.
Thank you.
And before we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to say about those coming to the Pint of Science talk or anything else at all?
Well, if you're thinking about going to Pint of Science, do. It is a university originated event, but it really is for you, it's for people out there, because what you think of as scientific research, of academic research, it is not nearly as stuffy as that, and our work really sits in the middle of society. It's about the stuff that exercises people, the stuff that people think about, the stuff that people want to read books about: prisons, police, violent crime, the minds of offenders, forensics. It is such a fascinating part of life to work in that we'd love to share it with you. You'll get a lot out of it, I think.
Amazing. Hopefully you all heard that. Well, I'm sure that the audience is in for a fascinating discussion with you. Professor Francis, thank you so much again for your time.
Thank you.
And I hope you enjoy the event, and maybe hopefully afterwards you can have a pint yourself. But yeah, thank you so much.
Good stuff. Looking forward to it.
Thank you.